So we now have an endpoint. However, if we try and run this code, we'll find that it doesn't work. So I run the server and fire up the client. The client looks something like this. The client's quite simple. In here, we type some text, hit enter, and that text should be echoed back, and it should appear here, just where the cursor is. We can see that isn't appearing. Inside Chrome, if I bring up the developer tools, we'll see we have a message. Connection to the endpoint has failed, error during WebSocket, handshake, unexpected response. The problem here is we have an endpoint, but we haven't deployed it yet. And because we're using programmatic endpoints, we need to deploy the endpoint in code. To deploy this class, we have to provide a configuration class. So let's go and add that now. We'll add a new Java class and we'll call it Echo Endpoint Configuration. This class, to be a configuration class, has to implement an interface, and this interface is called Server Application Config. And we need to provide implementations of the two methods on the interface. These two methods let us configure programmatic endpoints, the sorts of things we've just written, and also if we need to configure annotated endpoints. You typically don't need to configure an annotated endpoint, as the annotation provides the configuration for you. But we'll add the code here. It's generic code, so you can see what it's like. The way the configuration works is that there are two methods: get endpoint configs to deal with the programmatic configs, and get annotated endpoint classes that deal with the annotated endpoints. In both these cases, we have passed a set of class objects. And those class objects are the objects that we are looking for that implement the endpoints themselves. For the get endpoint configs, the only classes we care about are those that extend endpoint, which in our case will be the echo endpoint class. The annotated endpoints don't necessarily extend any base class, so in that case we pass the set of all the classes in the application. Our processing will look inside this set and pull out the classes we care about and add those to the configuration. We'll create a new server endpoint config for each endpoint that we care about and return the set of those server endpoint configs to allow the container to manage the configuration for us. The standard code for the programmatic endpoints looks something like this. We implement the get endpoint configs method, and inside here we create a set of the configuration results that we want to return, and then we parse through the set of classes that get passed to us. We look inside the set of classes. We look to see if it contains our class, in our case the echo endpoint class, and if it does, we create a new endpoint config by using server endpoint config builder create. We pass it the type of the class, so echo endpoint.class, and the endpoint that it listens on, and then we build up the set. That gets added to this result of hash sets, and we simply return that result. For now, for the annotated endpoint classes, we can just return null. We're not dealing with annotated endpoints at the moment. If we now run the server and open up the client, in here we can type in some text and see that it's now echoed back. If we look in the console, we print out two messages: an info message showing the WebSocket is connected, and then we log a response message showing the response we received back from the server.